A new book is giving a never-before-seen in-depth look inside Israel's secret military and intelligence operations. In Rise and Kill First, the secret history of Israel's targeted assassinations, Ronen Bergman writes, since World War II, Israel has assassinated more people than any other country in the Western world. But he goes on to write that the so-called assassination weapon is what arguably made Israel's war on terror the most effective ever waged by a Western country. And the United States has taken note. The book's author, award-winning journalist Ronen Bergman, is here on set. Ronen, I've known you for many years. You cover intelligence. You've done this for quite some time. But how did you get these officials to allow you to talk about this?
I smiled.
Your smile won them over. That's it, huh?
I smiled them over. I spoke with 1,000 people. Most of them, fortunately, allowed me to quote them on the record. And everything is in the book. That also enabled me to try and put aside some attempts. You know, politicians and intelligence officers are the masters of disinformation and manipulation. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm sure that some of them try to do that to me while making or trying to divert me to the way that they want to portray history. But having so many people speaking, corroborate that with many, many, many thousands of classified documents, I hope I could put this aside. Why did they talk? I think that after so many years in the shadow, some of them, if not all of them, wanted their story to come out. Because in Israel, these people are not seen as murderers. On the contrary, they're seen as heroes of the country because they stood on the guard of the country. They did what it was needed, what is seen as needed, to save Israeli lives. You
say that they are viewed as heroes in Israel, but aren't there moral and ethical dilemmas about taking someone out and killing them?
Of course. Now, there are two questions. Is it effective, targeted killing and assassinations, and is it legally and morally justified? Is it effective? So the answer from Israeli vast experience, the biggest experience on the face of the earth in using this weapon, is that in certain times, when it was part of an overall policy, when it was done systematically and not just in the show, you know, in the attempt to show them that we are doing something to the Israeli public, yes, it was effective. And it made Israeli leaders take a different approach.
But there have been cases, and I remember in particular when I lived in the Middle East, there was this 5-star hotel in Dubai. A Hamas commander went in, and it was a completely botched Mossad operation with CCTV showing you these alleged Mossad agents. How did the agency recover after that?
So that's the gap between movies and reality. Sometimes people make mistakes, and even Mossad operatives and assassins are human beings and they make mistakes. In that incident in Dubai, they were hubris. After a series of many successes the Mossad had under the leadership, charismatic leadership of Meir Dagan, they thought that nothing would happen and they should not attribute any kind of importance, not just to the target, a Hamas operative, but also to local police, and they were wrong. They did a lot of mistakes, and sometimes one can just say that sometimes even Mossad operations look less like James Bond and more like Inspector Clouseau.
You know, there were also multiple attempts by the Mossad to take out Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat that failed as well. Tell me about those, and why did they fail, and what did the country learn from that?
Yasser Arafat was extremely cautious, and he was by far the target to vast, numerous attempts on his life. The reason why he was saved is, first, he was very careful. In a certain time during the siege on Beirut in 1982, he figured out that the fact that bombs are falling on buildings that he just exited, that means that someone is after him. So he started to feed his own people with this information. But also, because the obsessive Minister of Defense, Ariel Sharon, ordered to take buildings and airplanes with innocent civilians in order to kill Yasser Arafat, that created a mutiny inside the IDF of courageous, brave officers, junior and senior, who said to the Ministry of Defense, we're not going to do that, or who were afraid to say it, but they jammed the operation, they lied, they jammed the communication and made sure that innocent civilians are not killed while trying to kill the target.
These are people at the bottom of the mountain who took a decision that their leader said to do and chose to do something else, and it transformed.
This is, according to Israeli law, this is an order with the black flag waving above it, and must not be obeyed. And I think these people saved Israel from involving in this horrific crime. And also, remain the ethic code of the IDF.
Who has to sign off when Israel wants to kill somebody? Who's got to sign off on those orders?
Only one person, Israeli Prime Minister. This is a very unique Israeli moment. You have the chief of an organization, Mossad, military intelligence, comes to the Prime Minister, usually to his private house because it's so secret. Now, the Mossad chief, he knows, of course, what is going on, but he doesn't know the details. So he brings the people, the intelligence officer, the analysts, they know the details. All of them are under the age of 30. Some of them under the age of 25.
Why so young, Ronen?
Because that's the way things are done in Israel. Regular service or professional service at a very young age, and even people recruited to the Mossad, it's very young. And just look at the forum. You have, and we have transcript of these meetings in the book, where you have the Prime Minister, the chief of the Mossad, and very young people coming to convince the Prime Minister to do the unthinkable, authorize the kill of someone because he is risking Jews. Now, through history, some of these young, very young people crossed the room and became the Prime Minister. Ehud Barak, Benjamin Netanyahu, Moshe Ya'alon, Naftali Bennett, who was part of that unit, is now Minister of Education. And Rina, you can just think, what does it do to a mindset of a person who actually pulled the trigger on an enemy in a targeted assassination operation, and now he is the Prime Minister and need to use sometimes at least, some other methods like diplomacy, like political discourse. Maybe it had an effect. I'm not sure that it was always the positive one.
What have you learned about the U.S.'s role in dealing with Israeli assassinations? Have they been involved? Assassination attempts,
In general, the United States refrain from being involved in that.
Because there is a law that prevents us from action.
According to American law, assassination are forbidden.
Yeah.
Targeted killing are allowed. But this is only according to...
So you're saying there's a gray line there?
I think that the American intelligence community came up with this perception of targeted killing that are allowed in order to bypass the presidential order forbidden from being part of assassination. Let me quote Michael Hayden, who was the chief of the NSA and the CIA. When I asked him, General Hayden, what was the one thing that had the most significant effect on Iran, of all the different methods that you and Israel used to stop the Iranian nuclear armament project? And he didn't hesitate. He said, Ronen, the one thing that caused the most significant delay was the fact that someone, I don't know who that was, it was not us, it's illegal according to American law, it was that someone was killing their scientists.
Someone.
And I said, someone. He said, well, don't smile. The Israelis didn't tell us that they do it, but someone was killing them. In Natanz, the Iranian facility for the enrichment of uranium, they are not building a bomb. They are building knowledge. And there's only one way to kill knowledge. And the fact that someone, the Iranians are convinced that Israel did that someone killed their scientist, instilled fear with the remaining scientists. Someone just retired from working there. And the Iranians were so terrified that they started to rescreen all the machinery. They were looking for Mossad moles. That by itself, without the Mossad doing anything, delayed the project in another 3 years.
So interesting to hear that fact. You look at our country here, and right now there is, in some sectors of the intelligence community, a divide between what some in intelligence and law enforcement want to do and the president's vision. In Israel, you've seen similar things. Meir Dagan, the former head of the Mossad, battling against Prime Minister Netanyahu. He wanted bombings, Prime Minister did, of these nuclear facilities. When the head of intelligence disagrees with the president or the prime minister, what happens in that instance?
So usually that needs to stay in a very, or it stays in a closed room, far away from the media or the public. But
who wins? Who wins in that battle?
Well, it depends who is stronger. But sometimes the prime minister would be, I would say, afraid to go for an action or not going for an action if it's in direct contradiction with what the intelligence chiefs are telling him. And Meir Dagan objected the attempt or the plan to strike Iran. That Prime Minister Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Ehud Barak supported very strongly. Yeah. And in his last day in office, he invited me with some other Israeli journalists and started to bash Netanyahu. Wow. Said the fact that someone was elected doesn't mean that he's smart.
Wow.
That he's taking Israel in a very dangerous path. And with his objection, he delayed and delayed and delayed the Israeli strike on Iran until it became just unavailable.
We've got to run, but I want to ask you, President Trump was accused of passing on sensitive intelligence to the Russians. Do you get a sense from the intelligence sources you spoke to in Israel, Europe, throughout the world, does the intelligence community, are they nervous about now sharing intel with the United States?
Yes. I was told by senior Israeli officials but they feel that the American administration, even a year after Trump was inaugurated, is still in disarray. The frequent change of people in the high position, the fact that not all positions are manned, the fact that there are other leaks that were identified, not just because, or not necessarily because there's a Russian mole, but because of havoc, because of disarray. And they are very hesitant in delivering such information because it can reach, as it did in the past, it can reach unauthorized hand. And you know, from Russia, that can also reach Iran. That could be a disaster from the point of view of Israel.
Ronen Bergman, as they say in Israel, kol hakavod. Congratulations for the success of your book.
Thanks so much.
It's called Rise and Kill First. Thank you for joining us, Ronen.
Thank you.